Mildred, you didn't put in the alarm. She shoved the valise in the waiting beetle, climbed in, and sat mumbling. Poor family. Poor family. Oh, everything gone. Everything gone now. So you can see now that the problem has come to her house. It's not Montag she's concerned about. It's the parlor walls that she's most worried about. Beatty grabbed Montag's shoulder as the beetle blasted away and hit 70 miles an hour far down the street, gone. There was a crash, like the falling parts of a dream fashioned out of a warped glass, mirrors, and crystal prisms. Montag drifted about as if still another incomprehensible storm had turned him, to see stonemen in black wielding axes, shattering window panes to provide cross-ventilation. The brush of a death-head moth against a cold black screen. Montag, this is Faber. Do you hear me? What's happening? This is happening to me, said Montag. What a dreadful surprise, said Beatty. For everyone nowadays knows absolutely is certain that nothing will ever happen to me. Others die, I go on. There are no consequences, no responsibilities, except that there are. But let's not talk about them, eh? By the time the consequences catch up with you, it's too late, isn't it, Montag? Montag, can you get away and run? Asked Faber. Montag walked, but did not feel his feet touch the cement and then the night grasses. Beatty flicked his igniter nearby, and a small orange flame drew his fascinated gaze. What is there about fire that's so lovely? No matter what age we are, what draws us to it? Beatty blew out the flame and lit it again. It's perpetual motion. The thing man wanted to invent but never did. Or almost perpetual motion. If you let it go on, it burn our lifetimes out. What is fire? It's a mystery. Scientists give us gobbledygook about friction and molecules, but they don't really know. Its real beauty is that it destroys responsibility and consequences. A problem gets too burdensome, then into the furnace with it. Now, Montag, you're a burden, and fire will lift you off my shoulders. Clean, quick, sure. Nothing to rot later. Antibiotic, aesthetic, practical. Montag stood looking in now at this queer house, made strange by the hour of the night, by murmuring neighbor voices, by littered glass, and there on the floor their covers torn off and spilled out like swan feathers. The incredible books that looked so silly and really not worth bothering with, for these were nothing but black type and yellowed paper and raveled binding. So I think that's a really interesting point here, is that as he's looking around, it's dawning on him as this is happening to him, as the firemen are starting to put in work on his house. He's looking at it, and he's looking at these books, again, being compared to birds with their wings ripped off. These books on the ground, like, is it really worth doing all this for books? Like, having this kind of production for books? Like, why? Why do they have to go through all this hassle for books? What is it? What's the reason? It's like starting to kind of spin the gears in his mind a little bit. Mildred. Of course. She must have watched him hide the books in the garden and brought them back in. Mildred. I want you to do this job all by your lonesome, Montag. Not with kerosene and a match, but piecework with a flamethrower. Your house, your cleanup. Montag, can't you run and get away? No, cried Montag helplessly. The hound. Because of the hound. Faber heard, and Beatty, thinking it was meant for him, heard. Yeah, the hound's somewhere about the neighborhood, so don't try anything. You ready? Ready, Montag snapped the safety catch on the flamethrower. Fire! A great nuzzling gout of fire leapt out to lap at the books and knock them against the wall. He stepped into the bedroom and fired twice, and the twin beds went up in a great simmering whisper, with more heat and passion and light than he would have supposed them to contain. Ooh, that's kind of a shot at the marriage a little bit, isn't it? He burnt the bedroom walls and the cosmetics chest because he wanted to change everything. The chairs, the tables, and in the dining room, the silverware and plastic dishes. Everything that showed that he had lived here in this empty house with a strange woman who would forget him by tomorrow. Who had gone and quite forgotten him already. Listening to her seashell radio pour in on her and in on her as she rode across town alone. And as before, it was good to burn. He felt himself gush out in the fire, snatch, rend, rip in half with flame, and put away the senseless problem. If there was no solution, well, then now there was no problem either. Fire was best for everything. The books, Montag. The books leapt and danced like roasted birds, their wings ablaze with red and yellow feathers. And then he came to the parlor where the great idiot monsters lay asleep with their white thoughts and their snowy dreams, and he shot a bolt at each of the 3 blank walls, and the vacuum hissed out at him. The emptiness made an even emptier whistle, a senseless scream. He tried to think about the vacuum, upon which nothingness had performed, but he could not. He held his breath so the vacuum could not get into his lungs. He cut off its terrible emptiness. He drew back and gave the entire room a gift of one huge bright yellow flower of burning. The fireproof plastic sheath on everything was cut wide, and the house began to shudder with flame. When you're quite finished, said Beatty behind him, you're under arrest. The house fell in red coals and black ash. It bedded itself down in sleepy pink-gray cinders, and a smoke plume blew over it, rising and waving slowly back and forth in the sky. It was 3:30 in the morning. The crowd drew back into their houses. The great tents of the circus had slumped into charcoal and rubble, and the show was well over. Montag stood with the flamethrower in his limp hands, great islands of perspiration drenching his armpits, his face smeared with soot. The other firemen waited behind him in the darkness, their faces illumined faintly with the smoldering foundation. Montag started to speak twice, and then finally managed to put his thought together. Was it my wife that turned in the alarm? Beatty nodded. But her friends turned in an alarm earlier that I let ride. One way or another, you'd have got it. It was pretty silly, quoting poetry around free and easy like that. It was the act of a damn silly snob. Give a man a few lines of verse and he thinks he's the lord of all creation. You think you can walk on water with your books? Well, the world can get by just fine without 'em. Look where they got you, in slime up to your lip. If I stir the slime with my little finger, you'll drown. Montag could not move. A great earthquake had come with fire and leveled the house, and Mildred was under there somewhere, and his entire life under there, and he could not move. The earthquake was still shaking and falling and shivering inside him, and he stood there, his knees half bent under the great load of tiredness and bewilderment and outrage, letting Beatty hit him without raising a hand. So, just one thing to point out here. Beatty does something pretty unique here in letting Montag burn his own house, kind of like as a punishment, as like, this is your mess, you're going to clean it up, is the way he puts it. But you can tell that Montag is actually doing kind of like what the firemen do, is when anything comes up as a problem, you burn it, you get rid of it, you erase it from your life. And he's supposed to be burning books, but Montag's really going far in like burning everything. He's just like burning the parlor walls, he's just like lighting up all Mildred's stuff, burns their beds. And that's more passion and heat than that room has seen in a long time. And Beatty has to remind him, like, hey, buddy, we're here for the books. Can you focus on what we're here for? But you could tell that Montag's kind of like releasing this. Like, perhaps maybe he's wanted to do this for a long time. Like, his life now is so different than what it was at the very beginning of this book. Things have definitely changed for Montag. So he's done. It's all over, and he's going to be under arrest. Montag, you idiot. Montag, you damn fool. Why did you really do it? Montag did not hear. He was far away. He was running with his mind. He was gone, leaving this dead, soot-covered body to sway in front of another raving fool. Montag, get out of there, said Faber. Montag listened. Beatty struck him a blow on the head that sent him reeling back. The green bullet, in which Faber's voice whispered and cried, fell to the sidewalk. Beatty snatched it up, grinning. He held it in, half out of his ear. Montag heard the distant voice calling, Montag, you all right? Beatty switched the green bullet off and thrust it in his pocket. Well, so there's more here than I thought. I saw you tilt your head listening. First I thought you had a seashell. When you turned clever later, I wondered. We'll trace this and drop it in on your friend. No, said Montag. He twitched the safety catch on the flamethrower. Beatty glanced instantly at Montag's fingers, and his eyes widened the faintest bit. Montag saw the surprise there, and himself glanced to his hands to see what new thing they had done. There's his hands again, personified throughout this entire book, with a mind of their own, doing things, and him just kind of like, oh, what are their hands up to? Oh, what's their hands got now? A flamethrower. Thinking back later, he could never decide whether the hands or Beatty's reaction to the hands gave him the final push toward murder. The last rolling thunder of the avalanche stoned down about his ears, not touching him. Beatty grinned his most charming grin. Well, that's one way to get an audience. Hold a gun on a man and force him to listen to your speech. Well, speech away. What'll it be this time? Why don't you belt Shakespeare at me, you fumbling snob? There's no terror, Cassius, in your threats, for I am armed so strong in honesty that they pass me as an idle wind, which I respect not. How's that? Go ahead now, you second-hand literature. Pull the trigger. He took one step toward Montag. Montag only said, We never burned right. Hand it over, Guy, said Beatty with a fixed smile. And then he was a shrieking blaze. A jumping, sprawling, gibbering mannequin, no longer human or known, all writhing flame on the lawn as Montag shot one continuous pulse of liquid fire on him. There was a hiss, like a great mouthful of spittle banging a red-hot stove, bubbling and frothing as if salt had been poured over a monstrous black snail to cause a terrible liquefaction and boiling over of yellow foam. Montag shut his eyes, shouted, and fought to get his hands at his ears to clamp and to cut away the sound. Beatty flopped over and over and over, and at last twisted in on himself like a charred wax doll, and laid silent. The other two firemen did not move. So, one of the things that's great about Ray Bradbury, hopefully you've noticed with this book, is that he is so incredible with his imagery and all of the figurative language he uses here. Just look at the way that Beatty's described as Montag is murdering him with this flamethrower. He's describing the sounds that are being made, like a hiss of a great mouthful of spittle banging against a red-hot stove, the hissing sound that makes, a bubbling and frothing, as if salt had been poured on a black snail, and it's writhing and it's liquefying, and his body's turning in on itself. It's not even like human anymore. Just very descriptive. And really pretty gross. Montag kept his sickness down long enough to aim the flamethrower. Turn around.